So this is our last lecture in on World War II, and also our last lecture for the year in world history. And so this is going to bring us to the conclusion of World War II. So we paused in our last lecture after the invasion of Okinawa and the United States successfully taking over the island. After Okinawa, the Americans paused to begin to plan for an invasion of the home islands of Japan. The timetable that the American army comes up with is to invade Japan in November of 1945 and hopefully defeat Japan by 1947 or 1948. The invasion of Japan is going to include over 650,000 American ground troops to invade the own islands. The Army is estimating a 35% casualty rate on the first day, meaning that after the end of day one, 35, so about let's say one out of every three, 33%, right? One third of the ground forces are going to be casualties. So that if you do the math, is about 68,000 dead or wounded American soldiers at the end of day number one of the invasion of the Japanese home islands. The Americans are estimating that 30 to 50% of the invasion fleet would be lost to kamikaze attacks, and that's not talking about kind of the mental aspect of the war, where in the Pacific, very few American soldiers were brought home from the Pacific theater. So they've been kind of just going from, again, island hopping, going from one island to the next island to the next island. And if they get hurt or they get shot, then they're just patched up. And from there. And so there's really a sense of hopelessness and despair spreading through the American soldiers, right? You also see this in the soldiers in Germany who are beginning to see that they defeated the Nazis, but by the time you're talking about November of 1945, they're beginning to worry about when are we going, when am I being picked up and shipped over out for the invasion of Japan? And so this is the setup that's going through the army. Through the ranks as we begin to set the stage for an invasion of Japan. Meanwhile, we have to remember that the Manhattan Project has been going on in secret in the United States. To refresh, the Manhattan Project is the atomic bomb nuclear program for the United States during World War II. We already have this. We wrote this down that it employed over 150,000 people, 37 different facilities, 19 different states in Canada that cost over $2 billion. What does this produce? Well, the end result of the Manhattan Project is on July 16th, 1945, the first successful atomic test at the Trinity Test Site in New Mexico. This is the first successful atomic bomb detonated and proves all the theories and all the science correctly. And this message is then relayed to President Truman. On July 25th, 1945, after hearing about the successful test, Truman then orders the military to make plans for dropping two atomic bombs on Japanese targets. Why only two? Because the United States only has two ready to go. They've got other bombs under construction, right, in the pipeline, but as of right now, Truman has two in the arsenal, and he decides we're going to drop both on Japanese targets from there. It's up to the ship, the USS Indianapolis, to deliver the atomic bombs from the United States to the Pacific Islands, the Marianas, from where they're going to take off. Because this is such a secret, and if you watch the movie Jaws and the Robert Shaw's character Quint does a much better job explaining this than I do, more dramatically. Because the ship was so secret, and when it dropped off the bomb and it went away, a Japanese ship, a Japanese submarine sent a torpedo and began to sunk the Indianapolis. Soldiers jumped out from there, and the survivors stayed in the water only for sharks, right, to be able to kind of circle and begin to kill and eat the soldiers one by one as they were being attacked off from there. So a little color to that story. The United States is going to make two different types of bombs. Right, there's two bombs. There's two different types. There's the uranium powered um, atomic bomb, and then there's a plutonium powered one. The uranium powered atomic bomb is what's called the gun type one, and it's a much more simpler a nuclear device than what's available now and from there. It's pretty rudimentary. It's called a gun type because basically you're taking a uranium chunk, hollowing it out, and then like a gun, right, sending it an explosive down to a target. When it hits that target, that then triggers. Again, simplifying this is very much the chain reaction that sets off the unleashing the atomic bomb. So the United States goes and constructs a test at the Trinity site in the middle of the New Mexican desert, hauls the atomic bomb to the top of the tower, and then goes and lights it off and sends from there. Again, you're dealing with powers of magnitude that are really hard to explain and understand, particularly if you don't have a whole lot of understanding what's going on here, right? This is kind of the first milliseconds after the bomb goes off, and you're going to say, well, isn't an atomic bomb really bright? Well, yeah, it is. It's so bright and so powerful that this part right here that's in black, it's not actually black. It's actually the heat and the energy from the atomic bomb traveling again at the speed of light, burning through the film negative, right, and punching a hole through there from again several miles away, just to give you some idea of the power and ferocity of the atomic bomb. So when it goes off there, that's 34 milliseconds, and then it begins to go and spread and go and big higher and higher again from a different angle from there. Again, 2 seconds out, that's again burned through the negative for how bright the atomic bomb is going from there. And so this is a pretty famous picture. It's called the Eye of God one frame because again, showing the power of nuclear weaponry being developed and used for the first time in world history. To give you some idea, some frame of reference for how big this is the bomb that was tested. This is the Empire State Building, and so you can start to see just how big and large this is as it goes 16 seconds off from there. Basically, what it does, what the bomb did here at Trinity was create a crater in the ground, and the heat from the bomb itself turned the sand of the desert into glass. And so if you go up, you can still they let I think scientists, I know scientists for sure, but you can apply to go and visit this because it's still slightly radioactive. It's not anything too bad, but you can go, you can pick up some of this glass in these pellets that were formed from the intense heat and pressure from the atomic explosion launched from there. So again, the leaders of the atomic bomb program, the science side, Robert Oppenheimer, and the military side, Leslie Groves, walk around. This is one of the few remnants of that big, huge, giant tower that the bomb was placed on in order to detonate it. So what are you talking about with the power from here, as it just kind of goes and illustrates up here, is again something that's not really understandable unless you kind of see a lot from there. In this second here, all that black stuff, that's not dirt, that's the paint melting off the front of the building. This is from a later nuclear test, but again, gives you the same idea of what's about to happen from there. And then again, so it's the heat that burns it off, and then it's a shock wave that comes from there from the explosion. When you watch here, watch the toilet fly out of the house, right, as it goes right there. And it's just how big and powerful this explosion is, as again, the shock wave is what does a lot of the damage. But again, it's the heat and the radiation that are also just as dangerous. So with the successful and with the bomb being delivered on August 6th, 1945, the B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, flies from the Marianas Islands and drops its uranium-fueled bomb over the skies of Hiroshima. 43 seconds later, the city effectively ceases to exist. A nuclear blast of 12.5 kilotons, that's 12,500 tons equivalent of TNT, is unleashed upon the city. To give you an idea of where the nuclear arsenal of the world has come since then, that's equal to one modern atomic artillery shell. So this is a shell that can be fired from a big gun on the battlefield. And one Minuteman III missile in the U.S. arsenal is equal to 84 Hiroshima bombs that can be launched from there. The fireball instantly raised surface temperatures within a mile of the hypocenter to above 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're cooking something in your home oven at 400 degrees, or if you ever put your hand in there and feel the heat come out from there, this is 5,000 degrees above that. This is temperatures that are close to the surface of the sun being unleashed on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. This was a plutonium fueled bomb, so it actually had a higher yield of 22 kilotons. but because of the geography of the two cities, with Nagasaki being kind of more in a bowl with mountains around there, the shock wave was more contained, unlike the larger plain of Hiroshima, and so it was less damaging from there, but a higher yield. It's estimated that with the two bombings and with the radiation poisoning, by the end of 1945, over 200,000 Japanese died due to their injuries and radiation poisoning from the atomic bombs being dropped from there. So again, thanks to the equation of E equals mc squared, you don't need a whole lot of mass. So the core of the plutonium bomb is right there, about the size of a lunchbox, as it's being kind of moved from to its assembly point from there. This is the bomber crew, led by Captain Paul Tibbets of the Enola Gay, which again took off from the Mariana Islands. Right, again flying over the Iwo Jima as a emergency landing point, and then dropping its bomb on Hiroshima. The next bomber took off a couple of days later. It was supposed to drop the bomb over Kokura, but clouds obscured the target. And so, because after two runs and not being able to have a clear view of the bomb's effects, it then chose Nagasaki before returning back to base. Well, that's what it is. And so again, you can see the mushroom cloud and the fireball from the Hiroshima bomb. Um, this is these pictures are again it's through the bombs, but it doesn't do a very good job of showing the scale. This bomb, the Hiroshima bomb, the uranium bomb is much longer. It's like 13 feet long compared to this one. Until this was called Fat Man and Little Boy. That was the nicknames given by the Americans to this. And so, what you want to imagine is the city of Hiroshima, which had not been targeted by the Japanese bombing crews over the course of March in all of 1945, because again, the United States wanted to be able to see the actual destructive force from there. So this X for this bridge right here is going to kind of mark where the bomb detonated in the skies over Hiroshima. And then this is what happened. Several seconds later, you can see the destruction and damage that the bomb produced from there. I'll put this website in the information link. It's called Nuke Map, and basically you can drop all sorts of different atomic bombs wherever you want all over the world. But if we were to drop an atomic bomb of the Hiroshima size on right on top of Joliet Catholic, so right there, you can kind of see, just to give you an idea, some frame of reference point from there. The fireball itself reached over 180 meters. Right from there, this would be heavy blast damage. You can see how far the radiation would spread out from there, and then you can kind of see going all the way out to downtown Joliet, all the way over to um, Highway 50, I-55. Uh, Light damage to be able to knock over buildings and other stuff from there. So you can just give you some sense of connection to how big and explosive this bomb is. And again, this is one of the smaller nuclear weapons in the world arsenal there. When the bomb was dropped, people described a blinding light. Um, Brighter than they'd ever seen before, that lit up again a cloudless, clear sky. And then people would, again, seeing this, would go and put their hands up and wipe away, and like a giant flash bulb, pictures would be taken of people in the streets. All right, and so you can see there was a person standing here, but their shadow was burned into, right, the ground, right, from there, because of how bright and powerful the blast was. And so you can kind of see this bicycle from there. These cause massive thermal burns from any exposed skin. This would burn retinas and eyeballs. There's all sorts of gory details. In John Hershey is going to do a famous article that's going to be turned into a short book in 1946, where he interviews 6 or 7 people in Hiroshima, and they describe the horrors of what they went and saw and had happened to them and to other people, as they encountered, again, from the severity of the heat and the blast to the from the bomb from there. When you talk about people's shadows being burned into the ground and other stuff, women described having the patterns of their kimonos being burned into their skin for weeks, for months, for years afterwards, right? because of the intensity of the light in the explosion from there. As we move to Nagasaki, this is the mushroom cloud that's developed 20 minutes after the bomb was launched. Nagasaki is a little bit more mountainous, so it's a little bit more of a bowl. So the shock wave wasn't able to kind of sweep down like the hand of God, uh, like it did in Hiroshima, and so a little bit more contained. You want to focus here on the stadium and the bridge here, which is kind of the target point for the Nagasaki bomb, and that's the after effects of the bomb unleashed on the city from there. Again, the power to bend over street lights. This is glass bottles melted together from the heat and intensity from there, and this is somebody's pocket watch that was burned into the time from there that it had. Some colorized pictures from the time period, again, just to give you some idea of some of the destruction and other things that people were walking into. And again, the United States did a very hush hush, but a very detailed study of the effects of the on Hiroshima, and you can start to see what the United States is planning on in the Cold War, right? What the mortality rate would be for school children, right? As again, you're getting farther and farther away. Where if you're within 1 kilometer of the atomic bomb and you're just kind of standing out in the open, it's a 93.7% chance of death of your mortality from there. So again, that's the type of numbers and stuff that the United States is going. The question becomes, why does the United States drop the atomic bomb? Why does Harry Truman, right, go and do this when the United States knows about peace feelings being sent from Japan to the Soviet Union, from other stuff? Why do they go forward and go and do this, right? Well, you can see here in August of 1945, what does Truman say? My objective is to save as many American lives as possible, but I also have a humane feeling for the women and children of Japan. So that's what he's trying to do. When a article critical of Truman's decision is written in 1963, he responds to the Chicago Sun-Times saying that again, he did it to save 125,000 Americans, to save the Japanese from defending the island from there, and then saving again all those different people, right, in order to be able to do that. So to save American lives is Truman's idea of why he went and dropped the bomb from there. So as we transition out from the war, how does the World War II begin to set up the kind of modern world that we live in? Well, that's discussed first at the Yalta Conference, and this takes place in February of 1945. This is where Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin meet at the Soviet Union, the Russian spa town of Yalta, and they begin to make plans for the post-war world. Stalin favors a very harsh approach towards Germany. He wants Germany to be split into occupation zones, right, and to be occupied pretty heavily and with a very strong and strict military presence from there. We have to remember that for the second time in 20 years, right, the Soviet Union slash Russia has been invaded by the Germans, and Stalin doesn't want this to happen ever again. Churchill disagrees, like we saw with World War One. The British want to be able to get back their economy back going, and they want to get Germany back on its feet to be able to create a trading partner from them. Roosevelt is going to go and step in and mediate the difference between the lighter approach taken by Churchill and the harsher approach by Stalin. And Roosevelt does this because he needs Stalin in the post-war world, one, because they need to be able to defeat Japan. And after the bombing of Hiroshima, the Soviet Union does enter the war on the American side against Japan. And also, Roosevelt wants Stalin's support for his new United Nations, his UN, that he wants to create after the war is over to be able to peacefully, diplomatically solve issues without the use of violence and warfare. What they come out with temporarily is a plan for a division of Germany into four zones. The Eastern Zone, pretty these divisions are based upon where the armies are, or at least going to be by the end of the war. Germany's going to be divided into four zones. The eastern half given to the Soviet Union, the western half divided amongst the Americans, the French, and the British. Stalin also promises that he's going to hold free elections in Poland and Eastern European countries. He's going to join the UN and he's going to fight Japan once Germany is defeated. He's only going to come through on two of those promises. Those free elections in Poland and Eastern Europe. Elections are held, but they're in no way free. They're heavily monitored and infiltrated and turned over to the communist wing from there. And so the Soviet Union, after World War II is over, is going to turn Eastern Europe into satellite communist countries run by the Politburo out of Moscow, and that's going to set up a kind of the Cold War where you have the NATO bloc of the United States and Western Europe versus the Soviet Union communist behind their Iron Curtain Warsaw Pact that again we'll talk more about and dive deeper into in U.S. history your junior year. So at Yalta, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin meet again to try to come up with the first preliminary plans of what the post-World War II world will look like. Uh, as the war winds down in the August of 1945, the Japanese surrender to Douglas MacArthur on the USS Missouri, and that formally ends the war. And again, just to kind of reiterate, what helps win the war for the United States is again, it's a war of machines. You can see the all those dots in the sky representing all the airplanes the Americans are able to put out from there. In terms of costs of World War II, you can see that the Soviet Union suffers much more than any of the other countries in terms of total deaths, in terms of civilians, thanks to the Einsatzgruppen and the Nazis invading there, and then also in war deaths as well. You can see that in terms of total deaths as a percentage of the population, Poland is another country that suffers very much, along with Lithuania and Latvia, but again, smaller portions in terms of that. When the war is over, the Allies, right, come up and want to be able to create a world that's not going to allow the horrors of the Holocaust to happen again. So the Nuremberg war trials are held. This is where the Allies put 24 surviving Nazi leaders on trial, and of those 24, 12 of them are going to be sentenced to death upon their convictions in front of this international tribunal. The rest are sent to prison, of which some of them commit suicide while they're there. 200 more Nazis are found guilty of war crimes throughout the trial as well, and they are punished to various degrees from there. Many, after Nuremberg, argued the trials didn't go far enough, that many Nazis managed to go free or went unpunished. One of the main drivers for the final solution of Nazi Germany, Adolf Eichmann, was able to flee Nazi Germany and end up in South America for a long time before being captured by Israeli secret forces and then being brought back to Israel. And he is the only person to be executed by the Israeli government in that country's short history. And we're still seeing in 2020, every once in a while, every couple of years, it seems that there's an undiscovered Nazi who was at this concentration camp or went unpunished that's being brought from another. In 2014, 2015, a in one apartment in Europe, one of the Germans who was living there, kind of who was very quiet and inquisitive, finally let somebody into his house, and they then turned him over to his police because his small, tiny, two kind of story apartment was filled with all this art that he stole or was able to pinch during World War II, and kind of just stayed there and looked at his art. So a lot of people were upset with the Nuremberg trials from there. But importantly, in terms of a world history thing, the Nuremberg war trials established the principle people are responsible for your own actions. Many of these lower level Nazis said, well, it's not my fault. I was murdered those people because the commanding officer said this, or you can't blame me. You got to blame the general. The Nuremberg war trial said that no, you are responsible for your own actions, for your own morals. You cannot just follow orders. If you're given a order that is illegal or morally wrong or morally reprehensible from your commanding officer, you are responsible and you are supposed to, uh, from the Nuremberg War trials, stand up and say unapologetically, unequivocally, no, I won't, or suffer the consequences for the actions. So that's what the Nuremberg War trials famously say. You can't just follow orders, and that's an important precedent in world affairs. for all the faults of the Nazis, they were very good at paperwork, and so there is a heck of a lot of documents available to the prosecutors at the Nuremberg trials to be able to find all sorts of evidence of which we showed you in some of these PowerPoints as well. All the vast amounts of paperwork and documents to be able to describe all of their horrors and stuff in detail in plain black and white in front of everybody. And so again, that's what it is. These are the pretty much the main Nazis were put on trial, including kind of Hitler's one of his high commands, Hermann Goering, who's the head of the Luftwaffe, who will eventually commit suicide in his cell in order to be able to escape the hangman's noose, unlike this German general pictured here. That's going to end our study of World War II, and also will be our last kind of new information for the year in world history. Uh, Thanks. Bye.